Hey everyone, welcome back to LightHearted. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Britton. We are so excited to introduce you to our guest today. But first, wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. All right, you guys, we definitely touch on some heavy-hearted topics today. So if you do have little ears in the car or wherever you're at listening with you, you may want to pre-screen this episode just to give you a little heads up.
Joe Morris is back, and we're so excited he's here to talk with us about men's mental health.
Yeah, we could not be more grateful that you're here. You have quite the bio. We wanted to, we just want to share why you are the guy who should be talking about this. Aside from, we didn't feel like we were qualified to talk about men's mental health. So we brought in the big guns here.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just read your bio?
That'll be fine.
Okay. All right, Joe started his pursuit of psychology and sociology right out of high school as he majored in both at WVUP. Joe started in psychology and shifted to sociology later. Joe never completed a degree at WVUP, leaving college to follow dreams of business ownership. Love that. Yeah. The School of Life became Joe's teacher. You're in good company here. You're in really good company. I love this. It became Joe's teacher, and his adventures led him eventually to marriage, fatherhood, and the U.S. Air Force. Joe received abundant training as an NCO and later as part of the chaplain corps in counseling and mental health care. Joe left the Air Force December of 2013 and pursued ministry full-time. During this time, he attended continuing education classes, conferences, and seminars that focused on mental health, counseling, PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and a wide array of counseling techniques and resources available to help those in need. I think it's so cool that there's so many things available to people, though. So I love everything about this.
Absolutely.
Joe's pursuit of counseling and mental health wellness is driven in large part by his own mother's battle with chronic depression and anxiety and his own battles with PTSD. Joe is currently an ordained minister and offers counseling for individuals and couples at no cost. Joe is an advocate of professional counseling and therapy and has a network of professional resources available for referrals, and he believes we are not made to do life alone.
Amen.
Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely.
So excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here for sure.
Okay, we've decided to skip the 3 questions that we usually ask our guests because he's a returning guest.
I am. And those 3 questions were brutal, so I'm glad that you're skipping them.
You don't want to re-answer them?
My answers might be different now. You never know. I mean, it's been a couple months, right?
Yeah, things change.
Right?
But if you want to hear his answers to those last time, you can go listen to his first episode. It was parts 1 and 2 with us. Yeah. All right. So I think we can just kind of dive in a little bit here.
Yeah.
Joe, what are the differences between men and women's mental health? So we're specifically talking about men today.
Right.
What's the difference?
Right. I think there are some obvious differences, but I mean, scientifically. So I actually brushed up on this just because, and I really appreciate the fact that you gave me, these questions ahead of time. This is definitely a very professional topic, and certainly I have my own story, but when we start talking about mental health, it is a big deal. And I'm certain that your listeners, they're listening, and many are struggling with their own mental health problems. So I'm very sensitive to not leading people the wrong direction. The internet is famous for giving all kinds of answers to all kinds of things, and most of them are just simply not right. And unfortunately, we live in a day and age where there's a plethora of information, but a real lack of knowledge and of useful, good help. It's not around. So I brushed up on this just a little bit because I wanted to see what was really going on now. I've been in the game for a long time. I was actually diagnosed with PTSD in 2006. My first tour in Iraq was 2003. So 22 years that I've been dealing with what I now know is mental health problems, issues, whatever you want to call them. And so that's a long time. I mean, that's 22 years of just walking through valleys and mountains and hard times and great times and family life and kids and yeah. But I think the science behind it actually, I found several good articles, but one actually comes from Mass General Brigham McLean Hospital. There was an article written by Dr. Catherine McHugh, and it was written January 13th, 2024, and it addresses this very thing. So I just want to use a couple snippets from her here because she says it very well. But she explains that more research needs to be done intentionally to look at gender norms. In other words, for a long time, research generally was for only men, so they would just research the male populace, and females were kind of left out. Well, then they started bringing that in, but there's no, really to this day, there's a large limitation on scientific or background basis for mental health conditions. However, we do know a lot. So I say all that to say, there has been a lot of research done, and a lot of these things can be split into truly gender norms, and it's a shifting thing, of course, because there's a lot of things that affect it. However, Dr. McHugh says, and I quote, "We know that women are more likely than men to have depression, anxiety, and traumatic stress-related disorder. Men are more likely to struggle with addiction." Now, historically, this is historically, at least here in the U.S., I won't say worldwide, that's not what this was addressing. These are United States, statistics. On the other hand, though, she says that men and women are affected at about the same rate for many conditions, such as, and the one example she gave was bipolar disorder. Now, so it's fairly equal with men and women, so the genders, but we haven't researched it much. And what makes all of these statistics difficult is the fact that the truth of the matter is mental health disorders or problems we know are severely underdiagnosed in both men and women. In other words, most folks alive have dealt with some sort of mental health problem that they just simply were never diagnosed for, never sought help for, so therefore they're not part of the statistics. I would dare say it's well over 50% of the populace has at some point in their life dealt with some sort of mental health issue. Okay, doesn't mean that it doesn't mean everyone's crazy. It does nothing, But depression, anxiety, those things can come in and go out of our lives. Times of grieving and loss of loved ones and traumatic events. It causes mental health issues. Okay, so and all us three sitting here most likely have had those problems. Yep, I have, and maybe not ever sought help.
Yeah.
And so we know that this is real. Now,
sorry to interject here. Do you
fine.
think it's, I know a lot of people don't seek help. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's because we're kind of coming out of a time where it didn't exist? Do you think that's part of it?
Absolutely. I think that there's still a very strong stigma.
Yeah.
And this is leaning into the exact topic today with men's mental health. The stigma is even stronger for men that they can do it, tough it out, the tough guy mentality, suck it up, let's go. And
be a man.
Right, be a man. And if you cry or if you admit any sort of weakness, you're not a man. And the mentality has been for centuries.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. It'll be okay. You're fine. And to the point that we can even say, even in the medical world, that, the old saying, time heals all, that's just simply not true. Time heals nothing. Now, I serve the one that does heal. God heals, but time, now it takes time to come to healing often, but time itself heals nothing.
Just waiting it out.
It
isn't gonna
is.
be the thing.
It is. It's still there. All the problems are still there. They don't fade. Anger doesn't go away. Sadness doesn't go away. Anxiety, depression doesn't just magically disappear because we waited it out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
well, you wake up tomorrow, it'll be better. Nope, still sucks.
Just go to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I'm so sorry to cut you off
No,
earlier.
no,
I would
no,
love to hear the rest of that.
It's perfect. So now she brings out something really interesting, and it's something that I've seen in my own world of pastoring and counseling and in leadership, which is that there is evidence that these trends, though, are changing. The rate of substance abuse, and it's not in a good way, the rate of substance abuse is now growing among women. I have to tell you, though, and this is personal, this is just a personal opinion, I believe that substance abuse has been there across both genders since the beginning of time. Men, it was more accepted that the guy goes to the bar and drinks to deal with his trauma or his depression or anxiety or stress. You know, they go out with their buddies after work, and this has been a long time accepted norm, social, cultural norm. You know, hey, let's go have a couple beers before we head home. Like, look, that's happened. Yeah. It's a fairly normal thing. And the workforce was predominantly male early on in this nation, and women started coming into the workforce. They were in the workforce, but in different roles. You know, it wasn't the norm for the female workers to go to the bar. They needed to be at the home. We had full-time homemakers, which were the mothers staying in the home and the fathers working. And all of this plays into it. But at the end of the day, how many moms were cracking open a bottle of wine at the end of the night and drinking themselves to sleep because they were stressed out from taking care of all the rugrats that were driving them crazy? This is the reality of life today, has been the reality of life forever. Some things just don't change.
Yeah.
You know, and so humans cope. Substances help. Not really, but we think they do. But there is a swing, though, that we're seeing it be diagnosed or come out into the light more often now. And I will say, just from my engagement in the recovery community, that I would say it's probably equal, men and women in recovery facilities that I personally have visited. It's equal, men and women. For hard, illegal street drugs, cocaine, crack, methamphetamines, heroin, pot, to alcohol abuse. It's, across the board, men and women. So, yeah, that trend, I think, now, is that a change in human behavior, or is that a change in willingness to seek help?
I think especially for women, it's like it has been destigmatized a little bit to seek help. I still think for men it is still it's like it's not as widely accepted. Right. But yeah, so I do wonder if maybe that's why we're seeing more women. Right. I guess like owning up to their stuff,
realizing that they're a mess and they're they're addicted and they need help.
Yeah.
And men, I don't know, men will maybe realize that, but still be too darn stubborn to go and get it. Yeah. And part of that is a stigma that still exists. So, yeah. So when we start talking about the science behind it, Dr. McHugh in that article warns against focusing on the biological differences alone. And I agree with this. In other words, don't look at gender is just part of that, but don't look at just the medical or scientific side of it, because what she attributes to a lot of it is social and cultural factors, discrimination and violence. I would add to her list, I agree with all of those things, I would add to her list 3 major focal points, I believe, when we start talking about this, which would be family, career, and faith. So those 3 points, family, faith, and career, I have seen to play a huge factor in, because those 3 things play a factor in who we are. Every human being. What you do for a living, that's part of you. Your family, that's part of you. And guess what? We don't control what we're born into. Yeah. We just don't. And so, you don't control the example that's set for you growing up. Just by that, by default, we're captive to effectively where we're born. Even, the nation, like we're here in the United States of America where healthcare is available and much more available, even though it still falls dreadfully short. But my goodness, third world countries, you don't go to a therapist to get help. You just live in a garbage dump and eat scrap food and try to survive. You know what I'm saying? I think that there's such a disparity there, but the reality is there's a lot in our lives that we simply don't control. Family, we do control our faith and what we believe, although there are very serious influences from a very young age based on how we're raised and where and what we're born into.
Like gender's not the only factor. Like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, but gender is a big deal. And so, today we'll talk specifically about that.
So with all that information, what do you think that men are mostly struggling with today?
And that's a great question. And obviously, there's no one answer that I can give you that's going to wrap it up. But I will recognize that simply you're just asking for an opinion here. And I think possibly the largest struggle for men is actually quite benign, small even, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think that men struggle to define the very word man. I think that we live in a world that would be more than happy through media and Hollywood to define what a man is, and very quick to do so, basing their definitions of a man and their portrayal of real men on whatever their mind says is good and right. And I know that this seems maybe like a strange answer to you guys and to your listeners, honestly, but man, I've done a lot of counseling. I've talked with a lot of men, and we can talk about all kinds of things. We've got a lot of topics to talk about today. I mean, mental health is very broad, but at the bottom of it, at the core of it, how you define a man, as a man, is a big deal. And even for you ladies, how you define a real man really matters to you on who you're going to choose for a marriage partner, who you're going to choose to be friends with, like how you're going to raise your sons. And you've got a young boy. It matters.
It does.
You and Jordan's definition of a man, it's going to play out directly in how you raise your son.
Yeah.
Well, men don't cry.
Yeah.
Does that meet your definition of a man? It does not mine, and I don't teach my sons that. Right.
It's good to cry.
Yeah, absolutely. And a close friend of mine, Greg Lisenby, told me a long time ago, he said, a leaking head will never swell.
Oh.
And
yeah, I like that.
He's one of the toughest guys I know. He's a former Spec Ops soldier in the U.S. Army, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. He loves the Lord, but he told me that, in a time when I really needed to hear it. Just humility, and so I think that's the key, if I'm going to be honest with you. How do men define what a man is? And then, the women in their lives. And my wife has been just an amazing person in my life to help me with that. To help me define, and we've raised 2 sons, and are still raising. I guess you never really quit, but one is 22 and actually currently deployed, and the other is 17. And how do they answer that question? Because it is our job. Yeah. It's the parents' job, really, first and foremost, because if we don't define it, the world will. And I can sometimes get on a soapbox about this one, because the world wants to define a man as a muscle-bound, womanizing, beer drinking, swearing, tougher than nails. I kill anything that walks. I got a job making $200,000 a year. I've got the finest woman, the hottest car. It's garbage. It's just garbage. And our boys, though, our young men, we're failing them. We're not telling them that that's not a man. You don't need to be, a Navy SEAL to be a man. I'm not saying Navy SEALs aren't men. They are, and I praise God that they exist and that they do their job and do it well. I do. I mean, we wouldn't have the freedom that we have without men of bravery. However, that's not the definition of a man. And so personally, I go to Scripture. You guys know that I'm a pastor, and so I've got a couple scriptures that I want to share. One of my favorite ones is one that I shared when my oldest son, Isaiah, graduated high school. And it's from 1 Chronicles 28:20. And here, the scene here is that David, King David, which I'm a King David fan. King David was a warrior. He was many things, but he was definitely a warrior. And so I think that men, there's a warrior spirit in a man, in every man. There is. It is, God created us with that. It appears differently in every man, but it's there. And so King David, obviously, it was there, and it presented very openly as a warrior king that led troops in battles, many, and won many battles. David was not a joke. He was a warrior. He was, by today's definition, a man's man. Mm-hmm. He definitely was, and I mean, he killed a giant with a rock. He's awesome, right? Like, everyone can get into that. But David is here at the end of his life, and he is speaking a blessing over his son. And I figured, Jesus would be ideal to take advice about what to say to your son, but Jesus never had a son, so we never had an opportunity to see what he would say. However, David, a man after God's own heart, he has this son, Solomon, who is taking the throne, is receiving the throne. And he says to him here in 1 Chronicles 28:20, be strong and courageous, and do the work. Do not be afraid or discouraged. Now, we could stop there, and culture would like to do that, because we can take those words and twist them into be big and tough. Yeah, go to the weight room. Don't take gruff from anyone. Fight if you have to. Win at all costs. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Real men don't cry. Don't be, and if we stop that scripture there, that's where we land. And I feel that that's where we've failed, because the scripture does not stop there. There's a comma, not a period. And it says, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you or forsake you until all the work for the service of the temple of the Lord is finished. God's never going to leave you nor forsake you. Define a man with this. Yeah, be strong, be courageous, do the work. I tell my boys, I told all the boys in youth group, what separates boys from men, I shared this on the last podcast. The difference is men do hard things. Raise your boys that way. Define what a man is by, okay, it's okay to be a boy. You're a boy, but you learn to do hard things. But it's not us. It's not our ego. It's not our strength. It's not our courage. It comes literally only from God. And his promise is he'll never leave us. So that's the beginning of the definition of a man, as far as I'm concerned, and how I would define it. The second one, the greatest commandment, comes from Matthew 22, and it says very simply, love God and love people. And he's speaking this to all people, men and women. I know that. But if I'm going to define to my boys what they need to do in life, they're called to love God. And that scripture says specifically with all your heart, soul, and mind, with everything. That's complete. In other words, if you can do nothing else, love God with everything in you. And then love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what that scripture says. So that's the second part. And then lastly, my favorite scripture is Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O Lord, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And you see, there's a common thread here. When we define men, we define them through the lens of Almighty God. He is the example because we are created in His image. So if you want to know what a man is, figure out who God is.
I love that.
In light of that, I think that that's what men struggle with today. They don't know who they are. And especially if they don't know the Lord. And reality is outside of that faith, you will struggle. I struggled for years. And I did all the things that the world said was manly things to do. I drank the beer, I chased the women, I lifted the weights. I was, whatever.
You're checking all the boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Everyone does that. Men and women. We want to be whatever we're supposed to be, and everyone desires to do well. That's a human trait.
Yes.
But it got me nowhere until I understood that it's not my strength. Now that doesn't mean I can't bench press 300 pounds. It doesn't mean I can't drive a nice truck. It doesn't mean I can't have a smoking hot wife, and I do, and I love her. But that's not the goal, and that doesn't come from my own doing or my own strength. It comes from the Lord's.
Yeah.
And walking humbly with Him. So I just think there's great.
I love that. I think that's so powerful. I feel like while you were talking, I was thinking about my own marriage, Jordan. If you're listening to this, which I know you will, I think I'm so much more willing to, follow what he has to say and listen to him because I know that he is trying to follow the Lord. Right. And so, if he was out drinking beer and chasing, I wouldn't respect that.
No.
At
absolutely.
all. I would have zero respect for that. And so if he came home and was trying to tell me my business, I'd be like,
whatever. Right.
Are you serious?
Just because you can bench press 300, you're not telling
you don't
me.
get to come in here and boss me around because you're strong.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think that's such a big defining factor, I guess, to me too, is I'm like, oh, okay, you're trying to follow the Lord. That's a real man for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So everything you were saying was just really resonating with me on why I'm not a very submissive human being in general.
Right.
It doesn't come naturally to me. I have to work really hard.
Right.
And so I was like, man, I really do listen to what he has to say. And I think that is a really big part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful balance. My wife, I would say, would be in your boat, not a super submissive person.
Yeah.
However, we've never butted heads. I know that I wear the pants that she picks out.
Yeah, I love that. She tells you what to wear, and you wear them.
That's right. But the reality is, she knows that as long as I'm chasing God, that it's not, I'm never going to do anything that would bring harm in any way, shape, or form to my family, my wife or my family. It's not going to happen because God would never do that.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful foundation to know. We can still butt heads and she can still be like, well, you want to do that? And I don't. Okay. And that's still, we've both got pretty strong personalities. I'm not a type A necessarily, but it's there. Yeah. I mean, I've been in leadership for a lot of years, so definitely
some type A tendencies.
yeah. If I need to make a decision, I can. She couldn't make one to save her soul, so God bless her.
And Lindsay's in the studio right now.
She is. She just shot me some daggers. But no, she knows that that's true. And it's okay. And she can make decisions. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, default-wise, it ends up being me. She knows that I will. Now, that doesn't mean that if I make a decision and she doesn't agree with it, believe me, she's going to speak up, just like
Yeah.
you will with
Absolutely.
Jordan. And
Yeah.
her voice is heard by me, and it's taken into account. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And at the end of the discussion, if the right decision is still what I say and she still doesn't agree, then we're going to have to haggle that out.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have to come to terms with something. But when there's a foundation that's not based on my worldly strength or my courage or my willingness to do the work, but based on God and the fact that He's perfect and we're not. Like, isn't that great comfort? It's like, okay, I know He's got it.
You've got this. This
Right.
is fine.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, He's got it. I don't know.
So we're going to quote you saying, real men love God and follow God.
Amen.
There you go.
Absolutely. And real men
love
definitely cry. I'm just saying.
Oh,
Listen,
yeah. We're a very pro-crying household if you need a good place to cry.
That's right. That's right. And not saying that men that don't cry are not real men. That's not what I'm saying. But I have sat with some really tough men by world's standards and otherwise.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just telling you.
I
Tears
do
come.
wonder, like, how often men just need a good cry. Because I'm like, I know, like, after I take a really long sadness bath,
Yeah.
like, I feel better. Like, things are lifted a little bit more because I was able to, like, get some emotions out. And that's more widely accepted.
Absolutely.
Right? For me to be like, I'm going to go take a bubble bath and be sad for 20 minutes. Right? So, like, how many men could just use a bubble bath and to be sad for 20 minutes?
Right. I think maybe the men's version would be like, let's go to the range and shoot 300 rounds.
Feels good.
Yeah, or go, beat something up, something inanimate, not another guy, but go, beat,
No bar fights,
I don't know.
no.
For me, and men and women are definitely different in this. I love physical labor, working with my hands.
Yeah.
I can spend a day in the hayfield.
Yeah.
Stacking 500 bales of hay that no one wants to do, but I love it. And I come out of at the end of the day dirty, sweaty, nasty, stink to high heaven, and sore and tired. And I feel like you feel coming out of a 20-minute bath.
Yeah.
Rejuvenated. And a lot
And
of...
we love that for you.
Yeah, not for you.
We love that for you.
Yeah, right.
All right, we kind of talked about some differences. We talked about what men are struggling with, which I am just so thankful for. So we as women, like, we know how we struggle, and like we're able to kind of like fill in for ourselves like how we need to. But how can we identify when the men around us are kind of just going through it? And then how can we be supportive of them?
Absolutely. Two great questions. And when I was thinking about these, actually... So how do you recognize a guy's going through it? It's actually pretty simple. However his normal demeanor is, when it changes, something's going on. And it's the same way with women. Reality. Although I've been married long enough to know that when I ask my wife what's wrong, she says nothing, it means it's not nothing. Right? Like, that's... So guys are generally...
He thinks he's
same.
decoded us over here.
Yeah. But I would say that, if you're around a guy, whether it's your father, brother, husband, whatever, if you're around a guy a lot and you know him well and he's normally jolly and happy and he becomes reserved and quiet, something's going on. If he's normally reserved and quiet and he becomes jolly and happy, something's going on. So a change in just typical or standard demeanor. Now, I will say this. He may tell you that something's up, but most likely it's not going to be directly. You can ask him, and men and women are similar here. You'll get a lot of, "What's wrong, babe?" "Nothing."
I'm good.
And so I do know that most men will tell you, including myself, when I tell you nothing, most likely that means leave me alone about it. One of the things that Lindsay and I, my wife and I, had to work through was she wanted to know, so she would stay at it. But with PTSD, that's the wrong answer. Leave me alone. If I'm triggered or if I'm in a bad place and you see my demeanor change, you've got to really know the man. and so there were some techniques, and I'll talk about them later, that we used that are solid to figure out how to get through that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that when you see that change in behavior, there's most likely something going on. If you know your guy, whoever that guy is, many of us will work through it on our own, or will, find help. Now, if it's prolonged, if you're talking days of this, and Lord forbid it turns into weeks or even months, figure something out. You got to figure something out. If he's not going to talk to you, get some friends of his involved and say, listen, hey, Joe's not doing well. And that's what my wife has done, and she's solid at it. The bottom line, you can tell usually. They'll let you know indirectly. And then to be supportive, I wrote right on my paper, look at this.
Okay. Go fishing.
All right. So, and I mean this kind of literally. I think that men, a lot of times, men and women deal with things differently. So one of the biggest things to learn about men and women is that their brains are literally different. So when my wife opens up to me when I get home from work and starts telling me about her whole day, she doesn't want me to fix it. She just wants me to listen, have empathy, and quite literally shut up. She doesn't need to hear anything I say, which is difficult for me. Most men are fixers. So when my wife tells me how bad her day was, I immediately go into fix-it mode and start wanting to tell her, well, babe, if you'd have just blah, 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 that's not helpful. So men and women think differently. So to support men, a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, for myself, and I feel like I'm representing all men here, but
that's what we wanted.
But we want you to just be in our lives, to be part of what we're doing. So go fishing. Well, I enjoy fishing. Okay, you want to know what's going on with me? Get me on a pond bank or a creek bank somewhere, or in a boat somewhere with a rod in my hand, and just sit there and wait. I'm going to talk. Be part of what I like to do, whether it's woodworking or fishing or golf. And listen, I get it. You're not going to like most of the stuff that I like. I understand that. The same as I probably don't like some of the stuff that you like. Lindsay and I have found over the years, we'll celebrate 20 years in September.
Wow. That's awesome.
It is. It's really cool. But we have found things that we do have in common, and fishing happens to be one of those. So for her to go fishing with me, she really enjoys it. And we find common ground there. And so it's in that peacefulness and stillness of just drowning a worm and we also like coffee shops. And we can go and sit in a coffee shop, and it's amazing the conversations that will happen. Yeah. And so that's... engage in his world. How do you support him? Engage. Once you're engaged in his world and he starts to open up, probably the most critical thing is to do what I tell guys to do, which is keep your mouth closed. Like, you don't need to fix him. Just let him dump. Okay. But there are a few triggers that you need to listen for. There's a few key things. And if you hear things that would point to something that's damaging for his psyche, for his mental health, if he is, if he's having dark thoughts, if there are intrusive thoughts that are there and they're continuous, he's going to, a man is going to give that to you if he loves you, but he's going to give it to you maybe in a way that you're not going to pick up on. So you really have to be paying attention. Statements like, this is just dumb. It's dumb. Forget it. That's him telling you he doesn't want to talk about it because he's giving up. And giving up on stress or mental health problems is one thing. Giving up on life. Men are way more likely to commit suicide than women. The statistics are staggering.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not a joke. Now listen, there's a lot of different theories in teaching, but what I teach is you ask the direct question, and I've asked it. many times. And I've had people tell me, yep, I either have a plan or I am going to kill myself. And they will tell you the truth. When you ask them directly, do you plan on hurting yourself or killing yourself? Okay? The key is to listen. So being supportive is really engaging in their world, making time for them, letting them know that it's safe, that you love them, and that they can talk. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, this is not going to be a one and done thing. You may go fishing with them 10 times and talk about nothing but the weather and what you brought for lunch. But on the 11th time, all of a sudden, the dam will break. I'm sorry. There's no equation to this. There's no guarantee that, as we engage in our loved ones' lives, that they're going to just immediately and automatically open up. Generally speaking, women will open up more quickly than men. It's going to take commitment. It's going to take a lifestyle change. So the beauty of this, though, is for healthy relationships, you want to do these things anyways. If I love you as a friend, I want to be engaged in your life. So totally. Even if I don't like NASCAR racing and you do, cool, let's go to a race, or let's have a race party at your house and enjoy it, because I like food, so let's eat food. And but engage in people's lives, get to know them. The reality is support comes from relationship, and we're not good in this culture at having relationships. If it's not done on our phone, we don't do it well. Yeah. And so I think that's it. So I've got a question. How do you ladies support the men in your lives when it comes to their mental health?
Rachel? What? One thing I've been working hard at is just being quiet and being there. I think, so golf. My husband likes to golf. Okay. And so I go for the curly fries. Right. And for him, because I like him. Yeah. But I don't necessarily enjoy golf. I don't, it's not super fun. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I've been okay, that is the thing he's really passionate about. Mm-hmm. And we get outside and we eat food and have good conversations. Right. So I think that's been really good. I also think, while you were saying that, I was kind of wondering how often people have to repair kind of some brokenness from previous relationships, like broken communication, and Absolutely. It takes even longer to rebuild some rapport. Absolutely. And so I think both of us have had to kind of be hey, I'm on your team. You can open up to me. I'm on your team. Mm-hmm. We're doing this together. So I think that's what I try really hard to do is Good. Just Communicate that we're a team and we can handle it together. But absolutely, Absolutely. This is helpful though, because I'm maybe I'm way off in some things, so this is good. Yeah. I'm glad we're talking about this. I think that's excellent, and I think that you're right there. Developing and pouring into that relationship, doing golf with him, eating curly fries. Listen, there's a lot of great conversation that happens in the golf cart between holes, and I can vouch for. I don't know. Jordan doesn't have to be here to tell me this. He loves having you there. I guarantee it. You better. I guarantee it. One of the greatest things that ever happened for our marriage, our relationship, was when she discovered that she really enjoyed fishing. Yeah. And I hadn't really fished a whole lot. I grew up fishing and I loved it, but whatever. Just with 5 kids and 2 jobs and who has time to fish? Where's the time? Right. But now it becomes a really neat getaway that we can just enjoy that time together. I love that. So, that's awesome. It is. It's so wonderful. Cute. Okay, well, I love all of this. Rachel, what about you?
Well, if I'm going to be brutally honest, I don't really have
learning.
I don't really have a ton of close men relationships, to be completely honest. So to be close to someone, to be there to help. And I've told Britton before, even when it comes to women and mental health, I just feel like I'm not the best at giving advice. So I'm a good listener.
Right. You are.
I think that's critical, though. Yeah. That's a great foundation for doing exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. So.
But it was hard early on because I just felt like I wasn't helpful because all I was doing was listening.
Yeah, believe me.
Yeah. But
I feel like we've talked about this a lot lately where people just need you to sit in the mess. We've talked about that and you are the person. Right. You are so willing to do that for the people you love.
Yeah. 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 And, people in crisis don't need opinions or facts. Realistically, they probably know everything they need to know. But the biggest thing is their life sucks. Yeah. Like, they just need someone to empathize with them and just sit in the dark with them and just, be there. Yep. And so I think that that's a great foundation. So I have no doubt that, the good Lord will put the right man in your life at the right time. And so when that happens, I think you've got that perfect foundation. So.
I agree. Thanks. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so you already mentioned that like tough guy mentality. How do you think that men can like break through that?
Another great question. I think, so the tough guy mentality, here's the thing. It's actually natural. Guys kind of live that out to some degree or another. And this world is full of guys at every level, and we've got tough girls and we've got tough guys. And we've already talked about the cultural norms and the stigma that's attached to mental health, especially when it comes to men. But I think that instead of breaking through the tough guy mentality, we need to embrace it and understand that God doesn't make junk. We're made in His image. He makes us exactly who we are. Now listen, life happens and circumstances happen and we get formed and by fire. And, people experience all kinds of trauma and there's all kinds of stuff that happens. But God already knows. Like, He's there in the midst of it. And you suffer and you experience the things you suffer and experience. And in Romans, Scripture tells us that God uses all things for the good and the glory of Him for those who love Him. And so it's like, okay, if that's really true, then why not? Like, the world needs tough guys.
Yes.
If I've been forged under fire, if I've been combat forged to endure things that normal humans cannot endure, if my brain has literally been rewired to, when I'm faced with a threat, to run at it and not away from it, then God had to have a purpose for that. Yeah. And instead of trying to rewire my brain and change what God has made me, why don't I embrace that and say, well, can I not now lead in a passionate, powerful way with God as the focus, you know what I'm saying? And in love. In other words, He made me this way. So, okay, God, what are you going to do with it? Like, do something with it. I'm not fighting in a war now. That's over. That part of my life is done. I don't need to face combat, but I do need to face battle. Ephesians chapter 6 tells us it's not flesh and blood that we fight against. It is the powers of darkness. It is the spiritual realm that we are constantly in battle with. I would be foolish to think that God wouldn't make incredibly strong men and women to face that. Like, why wouldn't He? You know what I'm saying? And I don't believe, not even for a moment, that those men and women are born. I believe that they are made, that they are forged right here. In other words, all the suffering and all of the pain and all of the hardship, it has forged us. We've went through the fire. You're not purified. Don't suffer with the pain and the suffering any longer, but understand that it makes us who we are. And everyone has a story. Everyone has moments of hard times and moments of suffering, moments where we are forged in the fire. That makes us who we are. So I guess my answer has changed a little bit, just recently. I don't think that we need to squash that. Now, tough guy mentality as far as arrogance and unwillingness to find help and unwillingness to address and directly deal with, I'm screwed up. Yeah, I am. Okay, fine. That's part of, my story. It's part of what I'm going to talk about today, of that road that I had to walk to figure out, how that happens, how healing really comes, what's really happening with me, what's going on, and how to fix that. But, at the end of the day, why do men feel the need to silently struggle? It's a learned, a taught, a born-in behavior of, I'm the warrior, I'm going to get it done, I'm going to take care of my family. Men are made by the Lord to be the defender, the protector, the leader. Not all men step into those roles. Many men don't, and who's to fault for that, or I don't know. That's not my job, and I don't think we need to cast blame. So we suffer silently. I don't know, pride, arrogance.
Yeah. I think a couple interesting things, and then I can't wait to get into your story. Having someone to walk through it with you. I know, like, my best friend, when she's like struggling to get stuff done, she comes over here just to body double a little bit. And so I was kind of thinking about that, where it's like, how many people just need like a body double through like a therapy situation, right? Where it's like, I just need someone to walk the path with me.
And they don't even know it.
Yeah. I think we've kind of talked before about like taking the hard things in your life and turning them into something really good. And so I would like to get into your story, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But I just really think that you are an example, and you continue to be a really good example of like, you can kind of take really, really awful situations and you turn that pain into something that you can share with other people and help them through their similar experiences. So, okay, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, Joe is going to share his story with us.
Hey everyone, during our break, we just wanted to let you know it's been pretty lighthearted up to this point, but Joe is now going to get into some stories, and the topic of suicide and being a combat veteran do come up. So if you're sensitive to any of these topics, we just wanted to give you a warning before we get into all of that.
All right, we are back. Joe, just take it away.
So I served in the Air Force 13 years, and so mental health for me actually was never a relevant thing. I had a good childhood, grow up, mom and dad together, and really not a big deal. Played sports, was just, I guess, kind of your typical kid, guy, whatever. Combat, though, brought a change into my world that certainly I wasn't prepared for. And so in 2003, I did my first deployment to Baghdad, Iraq, and then my second one in 2005 to Qatar. Married my wife Lindsay in 2005, right after I got home from my second tour. I was a single father at the time, so I had Isaiah and Vanessa, my two young children, when I married Lindsay. They were 3 and 4 when we got married. And both of my tours, actually, I did as a single father. Vanessa I left in November 2003, so she had just turned 3, and Isaiah was 1. It was tough. In 2006, Lindsay and I have been married for about a year. A lot of things come into play. When you start talking about PTSD, and specifically combat veterans that suffer with or struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder, there's always a story there, and mine is no different. My first tour to Baghdad was the big one for me, and there was a lot of trauma that was endured there, not the least of which was leaving my children behind at 1 and 3. It was excruciatingly painful. I had paramount physical custody of them. I had left them with grandparents, and actually suffered while there in Baghdad with my ex-wife. Took my children while I was deployed, and refused to return them to the grandparents, and sued me for full custody while deployed. So I was, 9,000 miles away, and
that's a nightmare.
Yeah, and so it was trauma on top of trauma when we're living life, we just live life. When things come to us, we, hit it. And I've always been the guy that just hits everything full steam ahead. Let's go. And so, you bear down and you make it through. But looking back, obviously, there's wisdom. Now I sit here, 22 years after the fact, and I can say hands down, I mean, that was extremely traumatic. I'm in a combat zone with constant bombs and small arms fire, and we were under attack daily, nightly, and I was attached to a medical unit there in Baghdad, and we saw over 4,200 patients in the 4 months that I was there. For the first time in the nation's history at what was called a combat air staging facility. And it was a hospital right on the flight line at Baghdad International Airport that we built, and it was a tent facility, but we had full-blown OR capabilities. Our survival rate was 90%. That came from the front line, so direct combat right outside of our doorstep. Right there, Baghdad International Airport is in downtown. It was amazing, and I worked with some of the most amazing men and women. In 2003, when we landed, it was right after, so the U.S. population watched the attack on Baghdad happen on television. Many of your listeners are too young, to have experienced this, but it was televised, no joke. The American public saw missiles exploding, bombs going off, and in Baghdad. It's very, very real. I landed, me and my group, right after the United States Marine Corps took Baghdad International Airport, and the U.S. Army secured it. I was in the Air Force, and so we landed there. We needed the airport for the combat missions. It was very, very strategic because we had to have the longer runways to get our larger airplanes in with cargo that we needed to wage war and to care for our soldiers. So it brought in logistically food and shelter and all kinds of things that we have to put boots on the ground. There's a lot of things that, most people just don't think about. So I will say that the U.S. military is a well-oiled machine, and it does what it does pretty well. And so, we landed, and it was secure. It was secure, and the action was nonstop. And it was a very difficult thing to get used to. We were trained and well-trained. But there's no training that really can prepare you for war. I tell people that war is indeed hell, and humans aren't created to kill other humans. And those are important statements, because when we live through those things, and then on the back side of it, trying to heal from it and move on from it, we have to understand those things. And so, my experience in Baghdad was brutal, and yes, it was traumatic, and I look back and I know that just the combat itself was horrific, but I'm among hundreds of thousands of men and women, millions of men and women over the years, of history of this nation that have endured it. So it doesn't make me special. Learning to understand that and then deal with that in a society, it is important. And understanding that the trauma that happens there is very real, and that humans are humans, and we act and react according to pre-mapped and presupposed ideology and ideals and training that is in our brains. And so for me, to fast forward and get out of the depressing part of my story, because of the incident with my ex-wife taking my children, I was enabled by a wonderful man who was my commander at the time to come home. right in time. I got home about 6 a.m. on the day of the court hearing, and was able to get dressed, get showered and dressed, get out of my desert uniform and into a suit and tie and walk in. Well, first go get my children from my ex-wife, and then walk into the courtroom. And thank God the judge found for me and allowed me to keep my children. And that's a story in and of itself. But, that ended the trauma of combat for me, but it ended on a note of more trauma, in a different type of trauma. What I endured in Baghdad was horrific war-wise. When I found out that I was going to lose my children, I was able to have some time on a phone, and I called back stateside and was able to arrange for a lawyer, got an attorney that was willing to stand in court on my behalf, but she was very brutally honest with me and said, "Joe, if you're not here, you're going to lose your children. She's going to win." She said, "I will stand and fight for you with everything in me, but most likely you need to prepare for losing your children." An AR-15 and limitless rounds of ammunition and plenty of opportunities to take your own life. I was pretty set that I would not come home from Iraq without my children. It just wasn't going to happen. So for the first time in my life, suicide was a very real option. And yes, I had a plan. It was to just eat the barrel of my rifle. And that's what I would have done. There's no doubt in my mind. So, my life was saved by one full bird colonel that chose to pray and listen to God. And at this point in my life, I didn't know the Lord. I wasn't a believer. And, the power of God's prevenient grace has never been more relevant to me than in those moments. And now as I look back, I know that, my life is what it is because of a faithful man of God who sent me home on his own power, which is just amazing. So all of those things accumulated, and for me, and then my second deployment, praise the Lord, I got my kids back and never lost them again. My second deployment, my kids were wonderful and healthy and staying on a farm and playing with cows and alpacas and, playing in the creek and able to be kids and be loved. That tour was stressful for me as well, but in a different way. I was without family and was under significant pressure to do my job and to do it well. I was a young NCO. I had just made staff sergeant and was in charge of the shop, which was a lot of responsibility in a deployed environment. And so there was a lot of stress, but thankfully, no direct combat, plenty of threats and plenty of terrorist activity all around us and plenty of threats, but no direct combat. And so that was good. My healing road, though, didn't start for a while. Lindsay and I got married. I got home from my second deployment September 18th. We got married September 24th. Had a nice long dating process. She had met my children while I was deployed, and they fell in love with her, as did I. And so, the proof is in the pudding. We'll celebrate 20 years this September. And
amazing.
It is. And so, when God puts things together, he doesn't mess up. We do, but he doesn't. So I'm grateful for that. 2006, I had drank alcohol pretty much since I was about 17 years of age up until this point. Alcohol was a very normal part of our lives and very normal part of military culture. Parties that we had always had a keg or a bar, and it just is what it is, and it's still that way. And, we talked earlier just about men with the higher propensity for substance abuse, and alcohol certainly became my crutch of preference. And yeah, it was fun, and it relaxed me, and I was certainly the life of the party. In those days, in 2005 and 2006, I was a little darker. And the alcohol, took the edge off and enabled me to live what I thought was a more normal life. And so it became a part of my life every single day. And so certainly by definition, I was an alcoholic, and life went on. Until one night, just a particularly bad night for me, that me and my good buddy, Captain Morgan, sat down on our back patio, and at the bottom of that bottle, it was just too much. And anyone that's ever been around folks that have drank or around alcoholism have probably heard the term drunk dialing. And, that's when you just get drunk and open up your cell phone and decide to start calling people and telling them how much you love them or how much you hate them, depending on the phone call, right? And never a good thing either way. Drunk dialing is really bad. And I did a little bit of drunk dialing and had some conversations. And my wife came out on the patio to talk with me. And I ended up sharing with my wife that evening, because of my drunkenness and lack of control. But I shared with her things that I never would have really desired to share with her about my time in combat. Not because I didn't want her to know, but because I didn't want her to have those memories. I don't know how long it was into it. I say 20 or 30 minutes into it. It could have been 3 minutes. I don't know. I was very inebriated. She, through tears, and I'll never forget the look on her face, just told me, you have to stop telling me. That was brutal. Because then, the full weight of guilt and shame that I was already carrying fell on me because I had dumped that in an unhealthy manner on my wife. Because I'm drunk, because I'm trying to cope with my own screwed up mental health. And so the next day we had a conversation. I was quite hungover, and she just told me pretty bluntly, you need help. And I love my wife. I loved her then a ton, and I still do. And so I said, okay. And quite honestly, it was for her. That's the truth. So, it speaks to what we were talking about earlier. How do you support? There, will be times that you're going to have to tell the brutal and honest truth and probably be firmer than maybe you're comfortable with. My wife was pretty firm. You need help, and you're going to get help. So I did. I was still active duty military at the time, and I made an appointment and went to the base hospital and saw a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't really remember which one he was. And he sat with me for an hour session and was able to pretty easily diagnose me. Wow, you're screwed up. And I was like, thanks, doc. And
you have PTSD.
Yeah,
What?
Yeah. In the first 10 minutes, he looked at me almost like he thought I should have known and said, well, you know that you have PTSD. And I was like, no, because I loved my military career. Loved it. I loved serving. It was an honor for me to wear the uniform. Still is, it's just a huge honor. And to know that I served, and it was a big deal. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the people. I loved it. I wasn't, and I knew that a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder at that time was a career ender. During our conversation, the big thing that bothered me was the anger that I had. And I had never been an angry man. And the second thing was the lack of patience. And oftentimes, people with traumatic experiences in their life, they carry PTSD across the board. Because of that trauma, we carry shame and guilt and depression and anxiety, and all of those things work together to create in us. Most often, it will come out of us as anger or extreme sadness, which will usually present itself by isolation, or just constant depressive episodes of just sobbing, and but anger was what it was for me. And the lack of patience. I was a single father when I was active duty military for 3 years. And the whole time before I deployed, before my deployment, I was just patient. I loved my kids. And I still love young people. I still love kids. But just, they could do anything, and it was like, okay, whatever, you're a knucklehead, and I just loved them, Did I discipline them? Yes, I wasn't a pushover, but I loved my kids, and I was just super patient. It's like, oh, they're just kids that were little. But when I got home, like literally the moment I picked up my children, I knew that I was different. Like, I knew it, and it scared me. That anger would come out, my anger, because you can't tell a 2-year-old, stop crying, and expect it to happen. But I did. I expected Isaiah at 2, when he was given an order, to obey the command. I didn't know how to fix it. I was so acclimated to combat. I made decisions that people's lives were in the balance. So I made them, immediately did it, and then lived with the consequences, but then immediately shoved that down because I had to make another decision. It over and over and over under extreme duress. And everyone around me did the same thing. So the only way that you can wage war is to train people to kill people, which means you have to change their brain. So for me to figure out how to live with PTSD, I finally started coming, after a long time, to this understanding that I had to understand what was really going on inside of me, because all the stuff that the world was offering, counseling and therapy and all these things, were good, but it was irrelevant to me, because that day, when I was diagnosed, my choice was, he said, well, what do you want to do? It's the end of our session. Do you want to set up appointments and start therapy and come back? And I just looked at him. He said, or we can seal your record. And so my choice was seal the record and maintain my career, which meant there's no required follow-on treatment. I don't want your listeners to think ill of the U.S. military. Yeah. We did what we needed to do to accomplish the mission, right or wrong, okay? And I don't hold them liable. Lindsay brought into my life, when I married her, God, a relationship with God. It was neat to watch once that diagnosis came from me, and I go home and I tell my wife, and she's about the same as the doctor was, like, well, duh, and the only one that was clueless in the whole thing was me, because I didn't want to have PTSD, because quite frankly, I lived most of my life believing that it wasn't real anyway, that all I needed to do was suck it up. It's over.
Yeah.
You're not in Iraq anymore. You don't have to be angry. These are your kids. Just love them. They love you. But it didn't work that way. So I really dug in. And the way that God worked in our lives was so amazing. He brought into my life a gentleman named Victor Castro. He was a worship leader at the Protestant chapel service on bass. He was an instructor. I was an instructor. We hit it off professionally. Got to meet him, and he started talking to me about God. And I'm like, yeah, I've been meaning to probably try to get it back in church. And, my wife, she's a believer, and I grew up going to church, and, I know that God exists. Quite frankly, my baggage told me, and had told me for years, that there's no way that a good God can be real, because there's no way that he would allow me to go through the hell that I went through. Why me? Why this? And, I was a whole boatload of woe is me, but he was the perfect guy. And God knew it. And we would sit down and have lunch together on my lunch hour, and he would bring me lunch and his Bible. My whole experience of Christianity was unfortunately very poor. It was very law-driven. Do this, don't do that. Grace didn't exist. The love of God was more like the fist of God that punished the wrong. Hellfire, brimstone, turn or burn. Hell is real, and that's where you're headed. And I decided at a very young age, about 19, that I was good with hell, and my buddies would be there, and I guess the beer would be warm, but I'd still drink it. All the while, he's pouring God into me. My wife is living it out in front of me, and I'm trying to figure out why I'm so angry and why I'm dealing with all these mental things, these intrusive thoughts, and these, life is good, and I've got a beautiful bride and two wonderful children. We've got a great home, and I've got a great job, and we've got everything we need and most of everything we want. Like, life is good. But why am I still suffering? Why is it still hard? And so I really start digging in, and God works through it. And I learn, okay, my training was actually very real, but many people are trained. But then I went, and then I lived it, and I did it. And so when real threats were there, I fought. And when death was all around me, I ignored it and focused on whatever it was that I needed to do, and I did it. And the way that translated it in civilian life, and still translates, is if I know you and I work with you and we're doing something together, I expect you fully, 100% to do your job. For me, it's a little more serious than just being the CEO or the guy in charge. Like, if I say, here's your mission, ABC, and you don't do it, I have to learn to get out of my amygdala and back into my frontal lobe, where I make good judgments and good decisions and say, well, she or he didn't do it because she was busy, and that's okay. Because the Joe in the amygdala says, goodbye. Yeah. I'm done forever. So you talk about trust issues, right? Serious. Like, I don't trust people. And to earn my trust takes more than what most people are willing to put into it, to be honest with you. So I had to learn all of this. And in that process of coming to grips with, no, I really am screwed up. Why am I acting and reacting this way? Why do I act out in anger when it doesn't require that? Why do I walk into my home that's supposed to be a safe place, and everyone that lives in it's on pins and needles because Dad's home, and all I want to do is love them? And so, how much damage am I doing? And then you carry the guilt and the shame. And when you start talking about men's mental health, and you talk about men who are trying to deal with it, but they don't seek the right help, and they don't understand what they're really living with on a daily basis is guilt and shame, because they're not the man that they're supposed to be according to their definition of man. And that's how we slide to the point that putting a gun to our head and pulling the trigger is a better option than seeking help. How dumb is it? Completely stupid. Yeah. How real is it in our minds? As real as it can be. I started figuring out what brain mapping is. I started figuring out the elasticity of the brain, the fact that what parts of the brain do what, and why I acted and reacted the way that I did. Why certain stimuli did what they did to me. Why I was triggered the way I was triggered. Why when I'm walking through Walmart a month after getting home from my first tour with my kids in the shopping cart and a balloon pops, why am I laying on the ground underneath of the shopping cart? We know, we've studied combat veterans and PTSD. We know that that's hypervigilance. We know that that's a normal reaction in the field to a bomb going off, to hit the ground and to take cover. And we know all of these things, but it's not supposed to happen in Walmart. But it does. I started realizing that I couldn't do it. I couldn't fix me just in my own power, and I needed more. So I started seeking help, and at first I was able to realize, thank God, that I could seek help through Victor. God brought Victor into my life, and so he started giving me help through Scripture. I gave my life to the Lord, and I started really digging in. We started having Bible studies at his home and family Bible studies, and they had kids our age, and we started going to church, and I know what most of your listeners are going to think. Well, he's a preacher, he's going to say that. But I'm telling you, before Jesus came into my life, there was no hope. I share the message that is real because I have lived it. I sought out everything the world had to offer to heal my PTSD, and it did not. Only Jesus. Now, the cool thing is God is more than willing to use the resources in this world to help his children cope and get better. More than willing. He gifts other people with incredible and amazing gifts to sit and to listen, like you were talking about, Rachel, to just sit and listen and be in the valley with you. He gifts people with these amazing things, and he puts them in professions. He gifts people with the ability to engineer medications that will help stabilize our moods and help us. Listen, they're out there for a reason. Go get help. Be diagnosed. It's not just a label. I am Joe Morris, a child of the King. I am not PTSD. I am not TBI. I am not VA disabled. Those are just things. Those are things that I have, not who I am. There is only one that has the authority to define me, and that's my Maker. That's Almighty God. He spins the world. He sets the stars in place. I'm pretty sure he can manage to turn my test into a testimony, and to allow me and you through our trauma and through our mental health struggles to pour into other people that may be in the exact same place that we have been and that God has delivered us from. And for us to sit in that with them and empathize with them and say, yep, you'll make it. I made it. You got it. God's got it. It's not you. Yes, be strong and courageous. Do the work. Don't sit on your hands. Your brain's not right. Figure it out. What's wrong with it? It's okay to have things that are wrong. We all have things that are wrong. There's not a human being that's perfect. None of us. And so figure out what's wrong. Figure out what your weaknesses are, and then work on those. Allow God to use his chisel and to chip away at those things. Combat veterans have some very specific struggles, though, and some different struggles. So when you talk about overall men's health, looking up some statistics. And so we've got 6.2% of the population right now in the U.S. So 340 million people in the U.S., 6.2% have served in the military, either have already served or are currently serving. That's not a lot of people, okay? So I understand that if you pinpoint focus on military personnel, combat veterans, that's a very small percentage of the overall population. However, we have statistics on the entire population, and the statistics for that one subset are so disturbing they're actually worth mentioning. There's an organization out there called, I can't remember the exact name, but it's 22, and it stands for 22 suicides a day from combat veterans, specifically just combat veterans. Now, I did the math. That equals 8,030 a year. And that's at 22. There are some studies that would suggest that number may actually be higher. 8,000 men and women that have been in combat take their own lives. They live through combat and take their own lives. I have suffered and struggled with suicidal ideation. I've had plans. I've had a gun in my mouth. I've had to tell my best friends to remove my guns. I've been driving down the road and saw a telephone pole or a tree and said, yep, this can be the last day. How do you overcome those things? Real conversations. Willingness for people to go, are you okay? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And then actually sitting in that with that person, taking it seriously. Yes, I am. And not immediately saying, oh, well, if you're suicidal, then we need to do ABC and we've got a protocol for that. You know, because if you're sitting with a psychologist and they say, are you suicidal? And you say yes, they immediately shift completely away from therapy and they have to walk through, 30 pre-prescribed steps to make sure, well, do you have guns in the house? Yes. Oh, well, you can't have those. Well, I'm a hunter. Well, do you have knives? Well, yeah, I cook. You know what I'm saying? And so our mental health system, when it comes specifically to combat vets, in my opinion, is kind of broken. According to the VA, the estimate of combat veterans that have suffered or at some point in their life with PTSD been diagnosed, 23%. 23% of veterans.
And that's been diagnosed
Through the VA. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, as of 2024, an estimated 23% of veterans have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder at some point in their lives. This translates, and this is where it's going to get you, it got me, to approximately 7 million veterans. Now, men's mental health, big deal. Now, that's both genders, okay? Yeah. But it would be a higher percentage male than female just because the overall percentage in military is higher male than female. But irrelevant of gender, the bottom line is our folks are suffering. They're struggling with this. And the reality is that's diagnosed. We know that it is grossly underdiagnosed. Yeah. Most, especially while still active duty, will not pursue help for the same reasons I didn't. They want to remain active duty and serving, so they're not going to pursue help other than their buddies and alcohol or drugs, whatever their coping mechanism is. If I'm going to get a message out there, for my combat veteran brothers and sisters, listen, you are different. Quit trying to assimilate back into civilian world. The psychologist that diagnosed me, I asked him before I left, I said, will I ever be the same? And he answered me, no. I said, will I ever be patient like I was? No. Will I ever be without this anger? Not fully. Those were brutal answers, but I've never forgotten them. But he left me with this. He said, but listen, it is your choice. Your choice to be impatient requires you choosing to be impatient. Your anger requires you to get angry. And I had to really absorb that and take it in and then modify my own life. So and he told me, he said, listen, there will always be a moment that you will make a choice. He said, even in Iraq, you made choices. Bam, 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 fast and serious. He said, and for the rest of your life, you'll be able to do that. So when it's negative things, you have to learn to stop. Combat veterans specifically are different. We don't know what to do with combat vets. Okay, but we try as a society to lump them in with others. So we'll look at a large group of people. So us three. I know your stories enough to know that there's trauma in both of your lives. Mm-hmm. I would say that it would be fair to say that you, at some point in your life, have suffered with PTSD. Fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that mean that we can lump us three into the same thing and thus treatment? This is why treatment's so hard. Treatment becomes the same. Is it the same for you dealing with what you dealt with that caused your post as it is for me? It doesn't make me better than you or worse off than you.
It's special help for everyone.
Exactly.
Everyone deserves some kind of specialized help. Yeah.
Right. The biggest lump in for combat veterans is with first responders. And
interesting. Yeah.
And we'll get and a lot of
I see
times,
the math, but
right, and the math does math.
I'm like, I see it.
And
but
a lot of folks will have wonderful ceremonies that will recognize. And I love first responders. Like, I'm alive because of a first responder. I fell off a roof and they showed up, and praise the Lord. So
But the help you guys need is different.
It is different.
Yeah.
And here's what I want to tell everyone.
Yeah.
It's seen in statistics. So check this out. Suicide for first responders, 17.4 in 100,000.
Okay.
So I like to do statistics apples to apples. For military members, suicide rate per 100,000, 34.7.
It doubles.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's significant. So what I want to, I guess, some awareness.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, I'm not mad that we get lumped together with first responders. I love them, but we are not the same. Like, clinically, if you've got a combat veteran sitting in front of you and you're a clinician, he or she is different because their brains are different. Now, first responders, their brain is modified as well. They have to be able to shut out a lot of things in order to do their jobs, and a lot of that is similar to combat veterans, and there's a lot of different things. That one stat shows, listen, people take their lives for a reason. I mean, it's horrible, and every single suicide is one too many. And I hate suicide. I hate it. I just hate it because I've lost so many brothers and sisters because of it. The truth is, it's difficult. So when we're talking specifically about men's mental health, and this is where I've had just so much experience, because it's like they fall in my lap. And it's like these men just end up in front of me, and we just start talking, and they just spill their guts, and it's just horrific things that, believe me, I don't want you to hear. I don't want you to hear. I don't want my wife to hear. Like, we're protectors by nature, but the people that have experienced it have to have that outlet. Yeah. Walking through that together, when you start getting to the nuts and bolts of mental health for men, we need that. You nailed it early on. I mean, you don't need me here. I know you love hearing my story and you love having me, but
I love it.
You nailed it when you said someone there with you. A body in the room. What was it you called it? Body
doubling.
Yeah. To that person that knows at least part of your story and can relate to it because they've shared that, that's huge. How do we address it now? By building those relationships and figuring out how to just let guys know, listen, if you're out there and you're a mess, and you are, find someone. Find me. You can find me, that's fine, but find another combat veteran that has figured it out. That's the key. I don't live my life in fear that I'm going to snap and lose my mind. And that was a very real fear for a lot of years. I am thankful that God has just shown me what He's shown me and moved in me and through me in the way that He has so that I can help. U.S. population, 340 million, which is up actually significantly. We were only at 320 million in 2020. So we've raised 20 million.
Dang.
And
Pandemic babies.
Oh,
Yeah.
dang.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me right now in our country that the percent of 18 and over in the U.S. is 78%. So 22% is under 18. Okay, so 22% we would consider still. So if you divide that by 2, because it's effectively half and half male, half female, divide that by 2, 20% is what they estimate right now. U.S. men 18 and over suffer with some sort of mental health problem. 20%. Now, when you read that, 20%, that may or may not mean a whole lot to you, but let me put that in perspective. If you do the math of the total population, that is 26,520,000 men 18 and over with a diagnosed mental health problem, which we know that they're severely underdiagnosed. And that is evident. And here's where it gets difficult, guys. That means 1 out of 5 men in your life, think about 5 guys that you know, one of them has a diagnosed mental health issue. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot. We know that they're severely underdiagnosed and underreported, especially men more than women, which would indicate that that number is more like 2 to 3 out of 5, which puts you to 40 to 50%. That's half. That takes that number from 26 million to 52 million, 53 million. 6 million men suffer with depression annually. 79%, and this is why we know that it's underdiagnosed. This right here, and this breaks my heart. Annually, 38,364 suicides, and 79% of them are men.
Wow. I didn't realize the percentage was so high.
I didn't either. That one shocked me.
That's a huge amount.
Mm-hmm. So let me do that math. So that's 30,307 men committing suicide. And so, that leaves by default around 8,000 women. And we know statistically that out of that 30,000, around 8,000 of those are combat veterans. You've got 8,000 out of 30,000. Now, remember earlier I said only 6.2% of the entire population, which is a very small number, of 340 million. I mean, it's a big number, but I mean, if I had it in dollars, that's a lot of money. But I mean, realistically, 6% of anything is not that much,
right.
And so, but when you break it down statistically, that is the lion's share. So 8,000 out of 30,000 is more than 25% of the total suicides in a year are combat veterans, are 6% of the population. Now, think about that. 25% are 6% of the population. That's
an indicator.
It is.
For a need.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that open conversations specifically about veterans, but overall mental health, because anything that I have learned about the way my brain works is applicable to anyone. It's like, okay, if you've suffered trauma in your life, you've went to your amygdala, you've wanted to stay there, you've just left the frontal lobe, you're no longer thinking correctly, you're no longer making good decisions, and that's where suicidal ideation is born. That's where all of these dark thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, they'll enter in there and they will beat us down, all of us. So, I mean, I just, wanted to jot those down and share those because
I love a statistic because I feel like it just makes it so much more real and heavy hitting. And so,
Right.
yes, I appreciate you coming with those because I guess I didn't even realize what a huge percentage it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Now, there's good news. So I don't want to leave it on a down note. Mental health issues, problems, they exist, and people are struggling greatly. You know, right now, today, if you did that number and divided it by 365, I wouldn't even want to know. Some things that have worked really well for me. One of them is the timeout method. It works across the board. It works for regular, normal people that are perfectly mentally healthy. And all of the rest of us, there's just jacked up beyond all belief, right? There are 4 people in this room, 1 off camera, but just 3 of us here right now. If I said, how many of you deal with anger issue? Yep. And what I've noticed, so I teach in high school health classes, and I ask that because I teach this method in high school. And I'll ask, how many of y'all deal with anger? And it's the percentage is well above 80% of our high schoolers. When they'll get real with you, they'll say, yep, I got some anger issues. I get mad. Like this, mad beyond just, that's stupid, and you walk out. My anger issues were definitely significant, and unfortunately because of my brain. When you see red, that's actually a mental state. A lot of people don't know that, but that's when you literally step completely out of this part of your brain and you're living here. You're living in the amygdala, you're living in fight or flight, and you're making decisions based on literally survival. And anger has a home there that is very gripping, and it will do things to us that we don't want done. I teach this timeout method. This should bring a smile to all listeners. This method, when used properly, works 100% of the time. I know that I'm making that statement live, and people are going to see this and everyone's going to question it. You always have a moment when you can make a choice. This method relies on you making that choice. When you're at that moment, don't you?
Yeah.
It's quick.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. It's quick. Yeah. I mean, usually you go from I'm mad to acting out almost immediate, right? And then before you know it, you're regretting a bunch of words that you just said and a bunch of actions that you just took, right? When you feel that anger coming, before you open your mouth or you move your hands or you do anything or say anything, you simply call a timeout. That's why it's called the timeout method. Now, listen, fair warning. Before you do this with someone, especially kids, if you're going to try this, I teach this to young people. And I always tell the teenagers, listen, this is not a joke. Don't just throw your hand up in your parents' face and call time out and walk away, because they're going to probably smack you in the mouth.
Find a respectful way to
Exactly.
do it. Yeah.
But there's an easy way out. Tell the person that you love, because most often this anger comes out with people that we love the most. Tell the person that you love that you're going to try a new method of controlling your anger, okay? And to explain to them what you're going to do in a calm time, okay? Just sitting on the couch. Hey, by the way, Joe taught me this cool timeout method, and I want to try it with you, okay? So when I feel myself getting angry, I'm going to call a timeout. And when that timeout is called, and here's the beauty of it, you or the other person can use this. And when you call that timeout, that means literally cease and desist. Both people shut up immediately, you and the other person. I don't care if it's mid-sentence, and that's why they need to understand. Second is, and all of this happens quickly, the second thing that has to happen is you part ways. So if no matter where you are, I don't care if you're out at a restaurant at dinner, then someone is walking outside. If you are the one that's mad and you call a timeout, you've got all these hot thoughts. When you walk away, the human tendency is to still fight that battle in our brains, correct? So we're going to walk away, and this is where it has to work this way, because this is where most of us fail. Most of us are good with the first part. Time out, walk away, all right? That's a fairly normal coping mechanism.
We can do that.
But the problem is we walk away, we go to the living room, we sit down, we get on our phone and start Googling why he was wrong and I was right.
I always like in my brain, I'm like, oh, that would have been such a good thing to say. Like as I'm walking away, I'm like, oh.
And then, so now you're building your battle for the next time you see that person. It's on. Oh, and by the way,
I fight myself. I'm like making the answers for the other person and then yelling
you have
at
the
them.
entire Yep. Okay. So
this isn't resonating at all. In case you're wondering,
no,
we don't need this.
Sounds like maybe I'm talking to the right crowd. So check it out. Go, if not a physical safe place, at least a mental safe place. Your goal is you're going to have hot thoughts. So you can't stop those. Yeah. They're coming. Now, there is a method, a biblical scriptural method that does work, and that's capturing your thoughts. To say, all right, Lord, no, I don't want to think about that. Jesus, capture that, remove that, capture that. And scripture says to think on things that are good and pure and wholesome. And then you start replacing those hot thoughts with good thoughts. Whatever it is for you, go to that safe place, capture those thoughts. And what this is doing to your brain physiologically is it's forcing it out of your amygdala and back into the frontal lobe where you will make good decisions. And that's where you need to be. Now, once you get there, the question you need to ask yourself is not why are they wrong or why am I right? But the question you ask yourself is, why am I angry? What's really going on? And you sit right there in that moment until you figure that out. So your separation time from that person, 30 minutes minimum. Don't leave for 5 minutes and come back. I promise you're not ready to go back. No. 30 minutes minimum, but no longer than 24 hours. And the reason for that is you have to address it. Have to. You will never work through anger issues by suppressing it. Self-coping is healthy and good, but if you never address it with the person, it never gets healed. And the key is to not just address it with you and then leave it. No, address it with you and then go fix it. Because in that healing comes healing for everyone. Mm-hmm. Because then they see part of you and you see part of them and you learn. Okay? And it's just wholesome and good. All right, so minimum 30 minutes, maximum 24 hours, readdress it. Now, the beautiful part of this method is when you get back together, say you wait 30 minutes and you're calm and you feel good and you've done your self-talk, you've calmed down and you go, you know what, I'm not mad at my husband at all. I had a really crappy day today and nothing went right and I just let it out on him. You come back together after 30 minutes. Here's the beauty of it. You start talking, and all of a sudden, you trigger again and you get angry. Time out. There's no limit on timeouts. You can use them every time. Every time you feel that coming, stop it. It is our choice. The world doesn't control us. Get a handle on those thoughts. Sit in it until you know why you're angry. This method works.
Love all of
I'll
it.
be using that.
Yep, try it. And it
it.
will work with your 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And here's what's cool with young children. It can empower them for them to know that it's okay that they can get angry, but they have a way to deal with that. And they can, I can tell you time out and you'll just leave me be. Mm-hmm. Yes, son, but we will, and this is where it's really important with the children.
We have to talk about
we
it.
have to talk about it.
Yeah. Like you can't escape it.
Right. But you can go calm down.
Take a break.
You're allowed to have that emotion.
Totally.
But work through it. And you're teaching healthy coping mechanisms. Yeah. Literally. And he's going to watch you and Jordan do that. What a blessing it's going to be.
Thank you for sharing that.
It works
That's
100%
awesome.
of the time. And
it's amazing.
Yeah. And so that was a lifesaver for us. The only other one that, well, I've got 4 listed here, but speaker listener method.
Yeah.
If you've heard of that, that's worth its weight in gold. I tell you something, you tell me back what you received from that, and then we just bounce it back and forth until you actually understand what I'm trying to tell you. Because
that's huge.
Communication sucks. We all are bad at it, all of us. And I can say, you look pretty, and you think that I'm hitting on you, right? And it's like, no, I'm not hitting on you.
So other days I don't look
right,
pretty.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's just crazy how that works. And it's like, no, I'm just saying today you really look pretty. Like I really like it.
Totally.
What you're wearing. And so communication is difficult. So speaker, listener, critical. You can Google that one, and I mean it's really, really simple. Therapy. I'm an advocate, a staunch advocate of therapy. I prefer personally faith-centered, God-centered, and God-focused therapy. Why? Because Jesus really is the answer. I almost wore my shirt today. I've got a T-shirt that says Jesus is the answer. Yeah. But in all reality, that's what works. And so my therapist, I've been in therapy since 2020, and still have a great working relationship with her. She just quit charging me because we just do therapy for each other now. It's kind of a handshake. There's a therapist out there for you. If you strike out the first time, don't let that stop you. Most people that are struggling, especially with depression and anxiety, will go to a therapist and say, that was awful, it sucked, I'm never going back. Yeah. And that is to your own detriment. Please, I'm begging you, all of you, if you're struggling with mental health problems, depression, anxiety, all of these things, go seek professional counsel. The standard thing that I hear is, well, why is that going to help me to just sit and tell someone I don't even know about my problems? How's that helpful? And I'm like, oh, you'd be surprised.
They have the tools you need.
Yes.
Let's do this.
And the reality is, what do you have to lose? That's usually my answer. Like, well, okay, so if you go sit down with someone that you don't even know and tell them all your deepest, darkest secrets, they're sworn to confidentiality. They can't post it on Facebook. Like, I would tell someone like that before I would tell someone at the grocery store that's taking video of it and posting it. And I mean, we live in a screwed up world, right? But what have you lost?
Yeah.
You sit down, you dump your garbage on someone you don't know and never go back. You lost nothing.
Yeah.
You
should never see them again.
Right.
That's fine.
Maybe a few dollars if you don't
exactly.
have insurance.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
That's fine.
But I am a firm advocate in seeking that out.
Yeah.
If you're a person of faith, and you have a church that you attend regularly, oftentimes pastors will offer counseling, and at the very least, they should have resources to get you into counseling. They should know, hey, you can call this number, go see these people, or even be willing, if you're in crisis, to take you to those places and to help you. I've done it time and time again, and we'll do it many times again, and I'm certain of that. This is just part of what the church is supposed to be, a safe place. So definitely recommend that professional help. And then the last one on my list is just God. That's it, man. Foundationally, keeping God at the center and the focus is a big deal.
Thank you so much. And I just really appreciate your focus on removing barriers for people to getting the help that they need. I think that's so cool. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and just, sharing some resources for people. Because I do think it's the first step's so scary.
Yeah.
The first step is the scariest one. So I just think that's so cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I do want to say this for the combat veterans out there and for veterans in general. I will say that if you have a bad taste in your mouth about the VA, give it a shot again. Try again. Maybe go to a different clinic or a different hospital or talk to a different veterans representative. Yeah. It's not all bad, and they really are trying to help veterans. I know that many veterans have had bad experiences, and I understand that. And if you're just absolutely adamantly not willing to seek help through the VA, then plug yourself in to a church, one that's got an active men's group. Hopefully maybe you can find someone that is a veteran themselves that is walking the path, and you can walk it together. I just think that none of us should do life alone. That quote has been my quote for a long time. We're not created to do it alone, and so it's just really, really important.
You're out there and you're struggling. Don't be afraid to get help. It's not something to be ashamed of or feel more guilty about. You deserve to be your best self and
Absolutely.
therapy and counseling, and God can help you be that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're enjoying Lighthearted, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps us reach more people who need a little more light in their lives.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram at LightHeartedPod to stay up to date on all of our episode information and behind the scenes content. You can also share your own stories with us on there. Go ahead and send us a DM. If you want to see us get ready to film these episodes and also see us just kind of be super weird, you can follow us on TikTok at LightHeartedPod, which all of those things that we just mentioned, as well as some resources that Joe mentioned. We're going to link everything below. So feel free to check those out and share them with somebody who needs them.
And don't forget to stay lighthearted. This podcast was recorded on Buzzsprout in West Virginia.